Panasonic, the heart of your system.
Hello, Briony here from Kit Guru, and in this video I'm taking a look at the Corsair K70 MK2 RGB low profile keyboard. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, Corsair has been recently updating a lot of its very popular high-end keyboards, sort of giving them the Mark II name and updating a few features and things, but the low profile version of the K70 is actually a completely new addition. We haven't seen anything from Corsair like this before, so in this review I'm going to be taking a look at it and see if it is worth what it costs, because it is quite an expensive keyboard. It comes in with a recommended price of £160 here in the UK. So to kick off the start of the video, I'm just going to start off by talking about the general sort of like build quality and aesthetics, which are pretty much the same on most of Corsair's keyboards. So it is another big black square keyboard from Corsair. They do all look pretty much the same now, so it definitely doesn't stray away from that too much. It does have a very nice brushed aluminium faceplate. The build quality itself does feel very sturdy, even though underneath, like the back of the keyboard is all made of plastic. It does feel very solid. There's no real flex to the body at all. It comes with a removable wrist rest as well. It's made of sort of like a thin plastic, and it's not really the prettiest, but I did find it very nice to use. It has a very nice sort of like a soft touch matte coating to it. At the top of the keyboard, Corsair have really unified the design across a lot of the keyboards that they've got in the range. So it does have the same sort of aluminium strip across the top there. Starting off at the left hand side, you've got a button to change between several different profiles that can be stored on the onboard memory. There's a button that changes the brightness of the lighting, and there's also a button that locks and unlocks the Windows lock key. You've of course got a very nice looking RGB Corsair logo. You've got some LEDs on there to indicate when you've got num lock, caps lock, etc. And then you've also, on the right hand side, there's a very nice sort of like, I think it is a metal volume scroll wheel, and then there's a mute button to mute and unmute the volume, and that teams up very nicely with the media control keys that sit just underneath that. The cable on this keyboard is nice and thick and braided. It definitely feels like it's going to last. It does split off into two USB connectors, so you plug two into the back of your PC. One of them powers the keyboard itself, and the other is for the USB pass-through. Corsair seems to include a USB pass-through on the majority of their keyboards now, and it is a feature that I actually quite like. It does definitely come in handy. The underside of the keyboard does feature two little plastic flip-out feet. I mean, you expect to see it on pretty much every keyboard now. I don't think I've come across a keyboard that doesn't have that option, so that you can use it at a slight angle, which is what I prefer to do. Unfortunately, the feet themselves are a little bit basic. They don't have any sort of like rubber pads on the bottom that stop the keyboard sliding around. When they are down, the keyboard definitely grips a little bit better. However, I like the design of them. They do flick outwards, so that if you move the keyboard around quite a lot while you're playing, they don't sort of like suddenly flick down and make the keyboard a little bit wonky. Of course, this keyboard does also feature fully customizable RGB lighting. It's very bright, it's very pretty, absolutely everything lights up. The media keys, the little buttons on the left hand side and things, you can change the colors of everything. There's loads of different settings to choose between, and you do that using the Corsair iCUE software, which I'm going to go over in a bit more detail a little bit later on. So this low profile version of the K70 has all the sort of good build quality and aesthetic and customization features that you would expect from a typical high-end Corsair keyboard. So now I'm going to move on to talking about what actually makes this keyboard unique from the other keyboards you'll find in Corsair's lineup, and that is obviously the Cherry MX low profile RGB switches. So basically they are lower in height, so of course this keyboard is actually quite a bit thinner and lighter. For example, the K70 MK2 weighs in at 1.25 kilograms and has a height of 39 millimeters, whereas the low profile version of the keyboard shaves off 10 millimeters off that height, and it also weighs in at 1.08 kilograms. I'm not really sure if that's what people are actually asking for in a keyboard. Do you want a keyboard that's actually thinner and lighter? For me, if I was going to take a keyboard around with me, I think something like a 10 kilos would definitely make much more sense. I wouldn't be putting this keyboard in my bag and taking it around, but the fact that it is thinner and lighter, I mean, it might be a good thing for you. The option is certainly there if you want to use it as a more portable keyboard. The slim design does look rather neat on my desk as well. If you look at it from a purely aesthetic perspective, it is slightly more sleek and stylish than like the chunkier full-sized keyboard. The keys themselves are slightly raised off the body, which does create quite a nice effect. The RGB lighting does shine out rather nicely, but the keys themselves, they are very solid as well. They have very minimal wobble to them, which is definitely what you want. If I take off a keycap, it actually reveals the very different looking Cherry MX switch underneath as well. These low profile switches have a more rounded design than the typical standard Cherry MX switches, and they are definitely lower in height as well. They have a height of 11.9mm compared to the 18.5mm you'll find on a standard switch. The keycaps themselves are very thin, as you would expect to find on a low profile keyboard, but they do have sort of like a slight curve to them or slight indent that does prevent them feeling like the flat chiclet keys you'd find on a laptop. They are unfortunately still not PBT keycaps, but they do feel very solid and sort of sturdy considering how thin they are. Corsair do of course sell PBT keycaps separately. I did do a quick video on those a little while ago now if you want to go check that out, and I can see them bringing out a low profile version of those PBT switches in the future. Out of curiosity as well, I did check to see if you could use standard Cherry MX keycaps on these new switches, and it seems that they are pretty much fully compatible. They work on every single one of the keys apart from the keys that feature the stabilizers, so like the spacebar and the enter key. The little stabilizers are slightly too short on these particular low profile keycaps, so you can't change a full set, but if you like the artisan keycaps, you could put a couple on this low profile keyboard. There are two mechanical switch options for this keyboard. So you've got the option of Cherry MX low profile red switches that have an actuation of 1.2mm, or you've got the low profile speed switches that I've got on my particular sample, and they have an actuation of just 1mm. Both these switches are linear, so if you're a fan of like the blue tactile clicky clacky switches, unfortunately you're going to be a little bit disappointed because there is no tactile switch options with this particular keyboard. Although they do have the linear design, so you expect them to be quieter anyway, they are actually remarkably quiet. I compared them to the sound I get from my K95 that has the sort of normal size speed switches, and these are definitely quieter. I think if you bought some of these little like rubber O-rings that I really mean to buy and try out at some point, I think you'd almost have a silent mechanical keyboard here. So what are these new low profile switches actually like to use? At first, I must admit, I really did not get on with them. If you're expecting like a typical mechanical keyboard feel, you might be slightly disappointed. They do feel somewhere between a membrane keyboard and a mechanical keyboard. I think it's to do with like the very low travel distance. After I spent a few hours with them sort of like gaming and typing, eventually I did get used to them, and then my sort of like overall experience and impression of them did improve. but at first they do definitely take a little bit of getting used to. So as expected, I didn't really notice any change or improvement in my gaming performance over using my normal speed switches. They do feel pretty much the same when you're gaming. I mean, the slightly different actuation point might make the key presses register like that tiny bit faster, but it's really not noticeable, and to be honest, no matter how much you spend on a keyboard, it's certainly not going to turn you into a pro player overnight. The lower height of the keys I think could actually make them more comfortable though. It does definitely feel like you're using the keyboard at a more natural height, and it is something that Corsair sort of like mention in their marketing stuff, is that it might be more comfortable to use. I'm not someone that actually like suffers from fatigue in my keyboard hand, like my fingers and wrists on this side don't tend to hurt. It's my mouse hand that goes first and like starts to get all crippled in pain when I spend too many hours gaming. But I think if you are someone that suffers from that, it does definitely feel more natural to use than a like full height mechanical keyboard. I think the thing that stood out to me most about these switches is how much quieter they are than like even the full size linear switches, and obviously they're a lot quieter than like the clicky clacky tactile switches, particularly the spacebar as well. Other Corsair keyboards I've tried, the spacebar is always quite noisy, but on this particular keyboard it seems to be sort of a more improved quiet version. Before I go over the final thoughts on this keyboard, I'm just going to quickly show you the Corsair iCUE software. I have covered it in a few other videos, but it's just there for those of you that maybe haven't seen any of my other Corsair keyboard videos. I do really like this software. It's nice and easy and intuitive to use most of the time, and also it has like loads and loads of different customization as well. So taking a look at the lighting effects on this keyboard, I've got Spyro Rainbow running at the moment, and then you've also got loads of other options: Rainbow Wave, Color Shift, Color Pulse, Color Wave, Visor, Rain, Type Lighting, Void Visualizer, which works with like your headphones. And then you've also got some custom settings. So if I go on like the gradient one, you've got loads of different options. You can change a whole load of different things. You add like a color, and yeah, it basically just gives you loads of control. I've got one set up here. This is what I've layered a few things up, and that's what I use on my K95. It's sort of like carried over. So yeah, you can basically customize it to however you want. You've also got the Actions tab, so this is where you can set up macros to like launch applications and things. Once again, my macros have carried over, even though this keyboard doesn't have the macros down the left hand side, it sort of remembered them. But yeah, you can basically reprogram any key to do whatever you want. There's loads of different settings: macros, text, media, launch applications, a timer. You can disable the key completely if you want to. And there's also like to switch between your different profiles and things as well. Yeah, loads of different options when it comes to changing what your keys do and macros. And then you've also got the little performance tab as well, so you can tell it what to lock, like when you disable the Windows key. If you want to disable some other options as well, you can change the colors of the lock indicator, so once again more RGB customization, and then you can change the brightness indicator color and stuff as well. So yeah, loads of different options. Up the top here, this is where you can sort of, if I go on the home, there's a way to download the newest firmware. Oh, here we go. So if I go into settings, you can sort of update the firmware, and you can clear the onboard storage of all the different profiles and things you might have on there, adjust the polling rate and adjust the brightness as well. If I go back to home, and then you can see this is all the different profiles that you might have. So I've got my default profile, which is like my purple flashy one, and I've got one for rendering as well that basically makes all my fans go really fast to keep everything cool. And you can see the 3 different onboard profiles as well. So if you want to take advantage of this keyboard being so thin and lightweight, if you want to take it with you, you can put your settings on those profiles and plug it into your mate's PC if you want, and it'll carry everything across. So yeah, in general, I do like the iCUE software, and I think most of the time it works really well, and it is nice and easy to use with loads of different settings. So overall, what do I think of the Corsair K70 MK2 RGB low profile keyboard? It has a really big name, but I do think it is another solid, well built, very attractive keyboard from Corsair. It does come at cost £160. It's pretty pricey, but I think it is a case of you get what you pay for. Using this keyboard has been an interesting experience for me. I don't think I'll be straying away from my full size mechanical keys anytime soon, but I think if you want a keyboard that is a lot quieter, then these low profile switches are actually a really good option. And you also might find it to be more comfortable as well, as the typing position definitely feels more natural. If you like this video, think it grew, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't been here before, thank you very much for watching. Welcome to our channel. Please hit that subscribe button and also remember to press the bell icon as well, and you'll get a notification every time a new video goes live.